Hey everyone. This week we're going to be watching 13 Days, a film recounting the story of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The film stars Kevin Costner as Kenneth O'Donnell, a special advisor to President John F. Kennedy, and gives us some interesting insights into the evolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis itself. While the film overstates the role of O'Donnell in the crisis, it otherwise, I think, presents a fairly accurate picture of how the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or ExComm, dealt with the crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis took place in October 1962, and the crisis had its roots in a decision by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev a few months earlier. In the early 1960s, the USSR was desperately behind the United States in nuclear weapons technology, and an attempted American-sponsored invasion of Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, had occurred. So, with limited missile technology capable of hitting the United States, and fear in Cuba and the Soviet Union of another attempted American invasion, the Soviet Union sought to expand its nuclear capabilities and deployed intermediate-range nuclear missiles in Cuba. Construction began in April 1962, and the missile's placement was discovered by the United States in October. As the Cuban Missile Crisis develops, it becomes clear that President Kennedy has few good options on how to address the military buildup in Cuba. Among the poor options he had, he could have done nothing and ignored the buildup. He might have engaged in protracted diplomatic efforts to convince the Soviet Union to remove their missiles. He could have threatened the Soviet Union and hoped that such threats might pressure them to change their minds. He could have used limited military measures like a blockade or airstrikes to increase pressure on the Soviet Union. Or ultimately, perhaps he could have invaded Cuba in an effort to remove Castro and the Soviet missile threat. The film deals with the discussions around these various imperfect options. As you watch the movie, there are a couple of items that should stand out in the context of international relations. The Cuban Missile Crisis has been the focus of considerable analysis and attention in the field of international relations. The most notable contribution in this respect is probably Graham Allison's Essence of Decision, which is an analysis of the Cuban Missile Crisis and rejects the traditional rational decision-making model, instead arguing that bureaucratic politics actually play a really important role in decision-making. The famous quote from Graham Allison's book is, "Where you stand depends on where you sit," meaning that officials are likely to advocate for solutions to crises that advance or utilize their agency's best abilities and advance their agendas. Military officials may advocate a military response, State Department officials want more diplomacy, and so on. So pay attention to where that plays out in the movie. I think there's a few different scenes where you'll see it. The film also does a really good job of analyzing or of illustrating the levels of analysis and the two-level games where domestic politics and international politics operate maybe in competing directions. Pay attention as you watch the movie to the scenes where O'Donnell reminds Kennedy about the upcoming elections and how concerns about the upcoming elections impact his options available during the crisis. Finally, the film also highlights some of the elements of nuclear politics during the Cold War. In particular, the scene where President Kennedy is recounting his reading of the book The Guns of August raises some really interesting points about technology and war, and the idea that the technology available to us changes even while our understanding of conflict does not.
You know, last summer I read a book, The Guns of August. I wish every man on that blockade line had read that book. It's World War I. It's 13 million killed. It was all because the militaries of both alliances believed they were so highly attuned to one another's movements and dispositions, they could predict one another's intentions. But all their theories were based on the last war. And the world and technology had changed, and those lessons were no longer valid. But it was all they knew, so the orders went out. Couldn't be rescinded. And your man in the field, his family at home, they couldn't even tell you the reasons why their lives are being destroyed. But why couldn't they stop it? What could they have done? Here we are 50 years later. I think one of their ships resists the inspection. And we shoot out its rudder and board. They shoot down one of our planes in response. So we bombed their anti-aircraft sites in response to that. They attacked Berlin. So we invade Cuba. And they fire their missiles. And we fire ours.
The concluding speech by President Kennedy, his peace speech, which he actually delivered in real life on July 10th, 1963, similarly, I think, encourages us to think about our common humanity and the nature of war and peace in global politics.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
In the real-world history of the Cuban Missile Crisis, as the crisis played out, there were concerns on both sides that the standoff could quickly escalate into World War III. Indeed, in 1992, Robert McNamara, who we'll see in the film, who served as Kennedy's Secretary of Defense, learned that Soviet commanders on the ground in Cuba had been authorized to use tactical nuclear weapons in response to an American invasion. On learning this, McNamara responds in a quote, "This is horrifying. It means that a U.S. invasion carried out, there would have been a 99% probability that nuclear war would have been initiated. We were that close." The film discussion guide raises other points for you to consider as you're watching the movie. You may want to quickly review that before watching the film. But that said, I hope you enjoy 13 Days, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about it. Thanks. Bye.
What is it?
On Sunday morning, one of our U-2s took these pictures. The Soviets are putting medium-range ballistic missiles into Cuba.
Morning, gentlemen.
Our cities in the southeast, as far north as Washington, D.C., are in range of these weapons, and in the event of a launch, we'll have only 5 minutes warning.
In those 5 minutes, they could kill 80 million Americans.
Well, it's clear we cannot permit Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. We have to get those missiles out.
The Soviet understands only one language, action, respects only one word, force.
I got a bad feeling about what's going on in there.
Sir, I think we have to issue pre-invasion orders for our forces.
There's no choice. It's going to cost lives anywhere we go.
We're talking about possible nuclear war.
We've got a bunch of smart guys. We lock them in a room, but they come up with some solutions.
The full spectrum of airstrikes is minimum response the Joint Chiefs will accept.
No. There is more than one option here.
You're in a pretty bad fix, Mr. President.
Well, maybe you haven't noticed you're in it with me.
Those damn Kennedys are going to destroy this country if we don't do something about this.
A lot of things are going wrong today. It's making everyone nervous. More things go wrong, people will become more nervous, and it will be very hard to avoid going to war.
3, 2, 1.
Good evening, my fellow citizens.
This is a setup. They want a war, Jack, and they're arranging things to get one.
What happens to you?
I'll be evacuated with the president.
And while you're under a rock somewhere, what am I supposed to do with your 5 children?
Sometimes there is only one right choice, and you thank God when it's so clear.
Stop that firing!
Lied right to my face.
Teddy, we need you to talk to them.
And nobody plays us off each other, and nobody ever gets between us.
Just wish for a second somebody else was president.
You mean that?
I said for a second.
First airstrikes start in 28 hours.
The world's watching everything we're doing.
I'm prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over.
I am the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, and I say when we go to war.